For most people, sacrifice is a moment. For Linda Marshall, it became a way of life. Long before dawn stained the sky pink, she was already dressed in her faded blue uniform, tying her hair into the same tired bun she'd worn since her 20s. The coffee she drank wasn't for pleasure anymore. It was fuel. Every shift she picked up, every hour she stayed late at the hospital cafeteria was for one purpose: Evan and Sophie. Her children were her heartbeat, her reason for pushing through aching feet, and a back that never seemed to stop throbbing. She remembered the nights they were little, when she'd come home after 14 hours, still managed to read them bedtime stories, then collapse into bed knowing she'd do it all again at sunrise. She remembered skipping vacations because maybe next year sounded better than "we can't afford it." She remembered pretending she wasn't hungry so they could have full plates. And she remembered the quiet fear she carried every month as she balanced bills, praying nothing unexpected hit. But she also remembered the pride. Evan getting into his dream engineering program. Sophie winning a scholarship for her art portfolio. The way they hugged her, promising, "We'll make you proud, Mom." Moments like that made every blister, every sleepless night, feel worth it. Linda believed that love, true, unconditional love, could build an unshakable bond. She believed her sacrifices had formed something sacred between them. She believed her kids understood, even if they didn't always say it. She believed their bond was untouchable. But the thing about bonds built in silence and sacrifice is that you never really know how strong they are until someone starts pulling them apart. And Linda was about to learn just how fragile hers truly was. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of quiet, unremarkable night that should have ended peacefully. Linda had just reheated leftover soup, still wearing her hospital ID badge, when her phone buzzed with Evan's name flashing across the screen. She smiled instinctively. Her son didn't call often between classes, and hearing his voice always gave her a small, warm sense of reassurance. "Hey, Mom," he said casually, the sound of laughter and chatter in the background. "Just calling to let you know about Thanksgiving plans." Linda set her spoon down, already picturing the grocery list she'd start tomorrow: turkey, mashed potatoes, Sophie's favorite cranberry tart. "Oh, good," she said, softening. "Are you both coming home?" There was a pause, a long one. About that," Evan muttered. "Dad sighed as having this big family reunion. Like, huge. And, they're only inviting blood relatives." Linda froze. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. "Blood relatives?" she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. "Evan, I raised you, Before she could finish, Sophie's voice chimed in the background, sharper, more dismissive. "Mom, it's not personal. Just don't come, okay? Just don't come." The phrase sliced cleanly through her. No anger, no argument, just that hollow, echoing silence afterward. She didn't remember what she said next. Something polite. Something like, "I understand," even though she didn't. When she hung up, the house felt cavernous. Her bowl of soup sat untouched, cooling as her hands trembled in her lap. Years of sacrifice, erased by a single phone call. And as Linda stared at the darkened living room, one thought repeated in her mind like a pulse. How did we get here? That night, Linda didn't cry at first. She simply sat at the edge of her bed, fingers loosely gripping her phone, replaying the conversation in her mind like a cruel echo chamber. "Blood relatives, just don't come." The words seeped into her chest slowly, an ache spreading like frostbite, numbing at first, then painfully sharp. Finally, the dam broke. She curled into herself, muffling sobs against her pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. She cried for the children she thought she knew, for the years she'd spent building a life for them brick by brick. For every Thanksgiving she hosted alone, juggling dishes and memories of being abandoned by the man they were now choosing over her. At 1 a.m., her tears slowed. By 2 a.m., she was staring at the ceiling. But by 4 a.m., something inside her shifted. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was clarity. If her children believed she was disposable, what would happen if she stopped carrying all the weight she'd held for so long? Who would they lean on then? She sat up, wiped her face, and exhaled deeply. A different kind of strength settled into her bones. Quiet, steady, and strangely empowering. By dawn, the sun hadn't even risen, but she had. She brewed coffee with hands that didn't shake anymore and opened her laptop. She didn't search for comforting words or parenting advice. Instead, she opened her budgeting folder. Tuition records. Housing payments. Each number felt like a memory. Each line item a sacrifice. And by the time she closed the folder, Linda had made a decision. A decision she never thought she'd be capable of, but one she no longer questioned. It was time to stop suffering in silence. It was time to show them what her absence truly looked like. The morning air felt unnaturally still as Linda sat alone at the dining table, her laptop glowing faintly in the dim light. The world outside was waking up, cars starting, neighbors shuffling out for work, but she felt strangely detached from it all. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, steady, almost eerily calm. She pulled up the university's financial portal. Her name appeared beside every payment. Tuition, housing, meal plans, lab fees, transportation passes, line after line of responsibility she had carried without complaint. Until now. She clicked the number for the university's billing office. It rang twice before a cheerful voice answered, "How can I assist you today?" Linda swallowed, her tone polite but firm. "I need to halt all payments linked to my children, Evan and Sophie Marshall, effective immediately." There was a pause, the representative taken aback. "All payments, ma'am? Including housing and dining access?" "Yes," Linda said. "Everything." Once the request was processed, she closed her laptop with a soft click. A quiet sound. But to her, it echoed like a door slamming shut on years of unspoken expectations. The fallout began faster than she expected. By noon, her phone lit up with frantic messages. "Evan, Mom, something's wrong with my dorm key." "Sophie, why is my account frozen?" "I can't get into the cafeteria." "Evan, did you miss a payment?" "They're saying I can't attend labs today." "Sophie, call me now." Linda read every message without responding. She wasn't being petty. She wasn't being vindictive. She was letting reality speak for her. For once, she wasn't rushing to fix the problem. She wasn't cushioning the blow or shielding them from consequences. She had removed the safety net they had always taken for granted. And now, her children were free-falling, finally seeing just how much she'd been holding them up. By late afternoon, Linda's phone was practically vibrating across the table. What started as confused messages had escalated into full-blown panic. First came Evan's call, sharp, impatient, brimming with the confidence of someone who had never struggled a day financially because she never allowed him to. "Mom, what is going on?" he snapped the moment she answered. "My account's frozen. I can't access the lab building. They're threatening to drop me from the course." Linda kept her voice level. "I'm sure you'll figure something out." "Figure? Mom, this isn't funny," he shouted. But before she could speak, he hung up with a frustrated groan. 5 minutes later, Sophie's call came in, her tone dramatically different. She wasn't angry. She was panicking. "Mom," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "They kicked me out of the dorm. I'm literally sitting outside with my suitcase. They said something about delinquent payments." A shaky breath. "Please tell me this is a mistake." "It's not," Linda replied quietly. There was a stunned silence followed by a burst of indignation. "So what? You're punishing us? Because of one decision? One holiday? This is insane, Mom." Punishing. Insane. Dramatic. Vindictive. The accusations poured out like water from a broken dam. Blame, denial, excuses, anything to avoid looking inward. They insisted she was overreacting, that she was trying to control them, that they were adults and deserved independence. Independence funded entirely by her. And through all the noise, Linda stayed calm. She didn't justify, she didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. Because beneath their anger, she could hear something else, something neither of them would admit yet. Fear, not of losing Thanksgiving, but of finally seeing what life looked like without her sacrifices propping them up. And Linda knew this was only the beginning. Linda spent the evening in quiet observation, scrolling through messages and old emails she had almost forgotten. Something about Evan and Sophie's eagerness to attend the family reunion didn't sit right. She couldn't put her finger on it until she found it. A thread of texts, carefully hidden from her, between the kids and their father, Paul. Paul. The man who had walked out when they were infants, leaving her to raise 2 children on her own. The man who had resurfaced sporadically with empty promises and excuses. And now, he was back, but this time with a plan. The texts were clear. He had promised Evan a car, a summer internship, and a scholarship recommendation. He promised Sophie an art portfolio showcase, studio time, and even cash, on the condition that they distance themselves from her. Every word was calculated, manipulative, designed to exploit the children and use them as pawns in his own self-serving scheme. Linda's chest tightened. Rage bubbled, but she didn't act impulsively. Instead, she leaned back, letting the truth sink in. The reunion wasn't about family bonding, it was a trap. A stage for Paul to appear as the devoted father in front of distant relatives and potential legal observers. Her children were the props, and she was the inconvenient obstacle in his performance. For years, Linda had thought she was the anchor of the family. Now, she realized she had been fighting shadows, and yet a part of her felt a strange clarity in this revelation. The betrayal stung, yes, but understanding it gave her power. She took a deep breath, letting her hands tighten into fists. Paul had underestimated her. He thought abandoning them once was enough to weaken her. He was wrong. Very wrong. Linda wasn't just going to watch this deception unfold. She was already planning her counterstrike. And when the time came, Paul and his schemes would pay the price. By the time Evan and Sophie arrived at the so-called family reunion, the glittering facade of Paul's promises began to crumble. The grand hall he had boasted about was crowded with distant relatives who barely knew the children, and some who barely concealed their annoyance at Paul's sudden reappearance. Evan's eyes widened as he noticed the tension in the room. Paul's rehearsed charm faltered, replaced by a twitchy, impatient edge. Sophie, clutching her portfolio bag, felt the weight of every unspoken expectation pressing down on her chest. The luxurious gifts and opportunities Paul had promised vanished like smoke in the air. The internship coordinator wasn't impressed. The scholarship recommendation was a lie. The car? Still in Paul's garage, untouched. Voices began to rise. Accusations were hurled. Relatives whispered behind hands. Paul flailed, trying to explain, but each word only dug him deeper. His carefully constructed narrative that he was the devoted father who had always been there, shattered in front of everyone. Evan felt panic twist his stomach. Sophie's hands shook as she realized how thoroughly they had been manipulated. Shame burned in their throats. Fear gnawed at their confidence. They had not only ignored the mother who had sacrificed everything for them, but had also played right into the hands of a man who saw them as tools. The room, meant for celebration, felt suffocating. The feast went untouched. Laughter turned into tension. And as the siblings exchanged a glance, their hearts sank. This perfect Thanksgiving was a disaster, crafted by their own decisions. For the first time, they understood what Linda had always known. Being deceived by someone who abandoned them once could cost more than embarrassment. It could unravel the very life they had been given. And the consequences were only beginning. Evan and Sophie didn't speak on the ride home. The tension in the car was so thick, it felt like it could choke them. The glow of streetlights passed over their pale, anxious faces, but neither dared look at the other. Shame and fear were heavier than the luggage stacked in the trunk. "I can't believe we fell for it," Sophie muttered finally, her voice trembling. We actually believed him. Mom was right all along." Evan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "We've messed everything up. Dorms, classes, Mom's tuition." She stopped it all. Neither child had expected the fallout to hit so fast. Locked dorm rooms, frozen accounts, emails from professors demanding explanations. Panic clawed at them, a raw, burning sensation that no words could soothe. Every mile toward home felt like a countdown to reckoning. When the familiar streets of their neighborhood appeared, a strange knot of dread formed in their stomachs. They expected relief, warmth, apologies, forgiveness, but the thought of facing Linda, the mother they had dismissed and hurt, made their hearts pound. They arrived, suitcases in hand, and found the front door closed, lights dimmed. The house, once a haven, felt colder somehow, less welcoming. Linda's absence from the usual morning hustle and clatter now loomed as a silent warning. They knocked, then knocked again. Their voices wavered, pleading, "Mom, please, we didn't understand. We were wrong." Inside, Linda watched silently from the hallway. She didn't rush forward. She didn't melt into tears or offer instant forgiveness. Her eyes, steady and controlled, reminded them that the woman who had carried them through every struggle, who had sacrificed everything, was no longer the same. For the first time, Evan and Sophie felt the full weight of the boundaries they had crossed, and of the consequences they had ignored for too long. Long before Evan and Sophie reached her doorstep, Linda had been preparing. While the children panicked over locked dorms and frozen accounts, she had quietly opened folders, gathered statements, and meticulously documented every instance of Paul's deception. Every promise he had made, cars, internships, scholarships, was lined up in black and white. Every manipulative message, every calculated word was evidence. She had already filed the legal case against him. Fraud, financial manipulation, fabricated family claims. Paul's carefully crafted image of the devoted father was about to crumble, exposed in court for all to see, and the children, unknowingly, had been his unwitting accomplices. Linda didn't need to announce it yet. She watched, patient, as Evan and Sophie fumbled with their guilt at the door. Their apologies spilled out, frantic and shaky. She listened, eyes steady, arms crossed, heart pounding with a mixture of sorrow and vindication. She could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that the safe world they had taken for granted was gone. The consequences she had set in motion were real. Tuition frozen, dorms locked, professors emailed. They had finally stepped into the discomfort she had endured alone for years. And yet, beneath the tension, a quiet power hummed through her veins. She wasn't just a mother scolding her children. She was a woman who had survived betrayal, abandonment, and manipulation. And now, she had the tools to strike back. Paul had underestimated her. Her children had misunderstood her. But Linda had the upper hand, and she knew exactly how to wield it. This was no longer just about punishment. This was justice. And when the dust settled, everyone involved would understand that the woman they thought they could deceive was the one holding all the cards. Evan and Sophie clung to the doorway, their faces pale, voices trembling. They had rehearsed their apologies in the car, over and over, but now the words felt hollow against the weight of reality. Their mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything, stood before them, not angry, not begging them to come closer, but steady, unflinching, like a rock carved from years of hardship. "Mom," Evan began, his voice wavering, "we're so sorry. We didn't understand. Please, give us another chance. We promise we'll make it right." Sophie's hands shook as she added, "We were wrong. Paul tricked us. We should have listened to you. Please, don't push us away." Linda studied them quietly, her chest tight, mind racing. She had spent decades bending, giving, forgiving, but this time the situation was different. She wasn't bending for anyone. She wasn't the silent protector absorbing all the damage. She had seen too clearly what loyalty looked like and what it cost when it was taken for granted. For the first time, she asked a question they weren't ready to answer. "If you can choose who your family is, why can't I?" The silence that followed was deafening. Her words weren't accusations. They were a mirror, a reflection of the hard truth they had been running from. Love isn't only about giving. It's also about respect, trust, and reciprocity. Evan and Sophie exchanged a guilty, stunned glance. The realization hit harder than any punishment. harder than any frozen account or locked dorm. Linda didn't hug them. She didn't immediately forgive. She simply stood there, a quiet force, leaving them to reckon with their actions, their choices, and the lesson they had finally been forced to learn. Loyalty and love are not owed, they are earned. And for once, the children truly understood what their mother had carried and what she was no longer willing to sacrifice.